What's going on, people? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Anass. I'm a junior doctor working in the UK, and I hope you've been well. Everyone behind the screen, everyone watching this video, hope you're chilling or working or chilling and doing everything that you like to do. We're looking a bit different today. Got the turtleneck. We got this bit of even though it's not autumn, we got the autumn vibe going, but we're going into spring, so I don't know why we have the autumn vibe. But today's video, aside from all the waffling there, today I thought I would talk a bit about one of my favorite books I've read this year in the last 12 months, and it's this book right here, if you can see that, Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. And I've actually got like a lot of insight from it, and I thought I'd share a few of the learning points from here, just extract a few points, not to spoil the book, so it still make it like worth reading for you guys, but at the same time, if you don't want to read it, then just watch this video and hopefully you'll get a bit of a flavor for what it kind of talks about. So let's talk about a few things that I like about this book, some things I learned. But before we get into that, I'd just like to say this video is kindly sponsored by Skillshare, which is our long-term sponsor for this channel. So Skillshare is a great platform and a community of creators who make classes where they teach skills that they're really good at. So you can find classes on a variety of different topics: creativity, productivity, photography, graphic design, anything that you're interested in, hopefully you'll find on there. For example, it's one of the places where I've learned a lot about video editing. For example, you can check out this class and watch it, and it talks a bit about motion graphics, After Effects, etc, etc. So make sure to sign up if you're interested in that. The first 1,000 people to click on the link in the description will get a free trial of premium Skillshare. So usually Skillshare is less than £10 per month, or less than $10. So yeah, you'll get a free trial of premium Skillshare. So sign up using the link in the description below. So I want you to take a look at all of these people that I'm presenting in this slideshow now. What do you think makes those people different from others? One would think that there is an inherent ability here which is beyond what any of us could have done, that there is a genetic component, an inherent ability. You might think that some people are just born faster, born stronger, born sharper than everyone else. This is what you might think, but then this topic is actually far more nuanced than you can imagine. So some of the ideas that this video presents are not my own, but from the actual book, and can honestly be life-changing for some, and it's changed a lot in my life as well. It presents an interesting view on what makes some people successful. That's what we're going to talk about in this video in the context of this book. And so this video starts with hockey players. This is Gordie Howe. He was a professional hockey player who played in the NHL between 1946 to 1980, and he's considered one of the greatest hockey players of all time, winning about 26 seasons in the NHL. And an interesting fact, he was born on the 31st of March 1928. More recently, I did a quick Google search of the top world hockey teams, and here we have the Montreal Canadian hockey team. Obviously, to get into a team like this, you need to be at the top. You need to be the cream of the crop in terms of speed and agility. So I've listed their names and their date of births as well, and obviously the position is forward. On first glance, you might not notice anything special with this list, but on closer inspection, you'll realize that there is something much more unexpected. In the book Outliers, Malcolm Gladwell takes an excerpt from a final NHL game. And you know how in football you have commentary and it says, Messi passes it, Iniesta, and then you have Iniesta, Xavi, Samuel Eto'o, golazo. Yeah, the exact same thing. You have commentary. So that's exactly what he's done. So he's taken an excerpt, but then instead of the puck going from this person's name to this person's name, what he's done is he's substituted the names of those players for the month that they are born. And this is what it sounds like. March starts around one side of the Tigers' net, leaving the puck for his teammates January, who passes it to January, who flips it back to March. March shoots point blank at Tigers goalkeeper April. April blocks the shot and rebounds it to March. He shoots February, and February dive to block the puck while January looks on helplessly and March scores. Okay, so now you've probably got a hint to where we're going with this. Why were there no Septembers, Octobers or Novembers on that list or during that commentary? Barely any. But there were plenty of February, March and May. Some people will say that there is some astrology going on here, some zodiac signs, and they're not this right one, but it's none of that. It's actually something called relative age effect. You see, the birthday cutoff for placing children into specific teams in many sports is the 1st of January, meaning if you're born on the 1st of January, then you'll be the oldest kid in your team. On the contrary, if you're born on the 31st of December, then you'll be the youngest kid in the team. And remember here that a 1 year difference between a 4 and a 5-year-old is not the same as a 1 year difference between a 20 and a 21-year-old. At any moment in time, if both of those kids are playing in the same team, the January kid would have had a whole extra year of eating, growing and maturing mentally. On the other hand, the December kid will always be playing catch up. They'll always be slightly smaller, less likely to be as fast and less likely to be as big. What happens next is what the psychologist Barnsley, footnote here, he's the one who came up or pioneered this theory, calls selection, streaming and differentiation. And this is where the role of the coach essentially steps in. You see, the best kids from that group will be selected, most likely the January, February and March group, because they are bigger, faster and stronger. And they'll be selected based on presumed ability and put into separate groups. The January kid will be at the top team and the December kid will likely be in the bottom team. Then differentiation happens, and this is where the different teams are treated differently. Because the January team will be assumed to have more potential, they'll be given more extra coaching, they'll be given more attention, and they'll be given more funding. And this essentially becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy in which a few kids are selected because they are thought to be better, and then they become better because they are selected. And obviously, it's not as simple as that. There is a genetic and inherent component at play here. But don't you think that it is possible that that December kid could have become much more successful had they been born 2 days later, getting more attention, more funding, more training, more coaching? This example does a really good job at introducing the natural biases of our society, and just purely the awareness of their existence can mean that we can move around in a different way from what we would have done if we didn't know about this. Now let's move on to the second example from this book. We're going to talk about two in some ways similar people but had very different paths laid out for them in life. The first guy, Chris Langan, arguably one of the smartest people in the world, had an IQ of 195. For comparison, Einstein had an IQ of 150. He grew up in quite a disjointed household. His mother had 4 sons and his father disappeared before he was born. Her second husband was murdered, the third one committed suicide, and the final one was a failed journalist, as the book puts it. I don't know exactly what that means, but he also kind of disappeared somewhere in the middle of their kind of childhood. Now, cut long story short, he was severely disadvantaged but super intelligent. He could walk into a test in a foreign language and still ace the test even though he hadn't revised for it and only kind of flicked through the books for a couple of minutes. He had a perfect SAT score, even though I kind of don't know much about the SAT, but anyway. And at the age of 14, he would draw something just for jokes and it would turn out to look like a photograph, alright? That's the caliber of individual we're talking about here. For an individual of this caliber, you'd expect some innovation on a global scale. But Chris Langan ended up working on his own farm doing manual labor. Now, that's not a bad thing, but in the context of what we're talking about, you'd expect something different. But with him, what you see consistently in his life, that there was a pushback or a challenge kind of against him progressing. So for example, he was offered a scholarship to study at Reed College, but then he lost that scholarship because his mum forgot to fill up the paperwork. I mean, look how sad that is. The university couldn't even give him a second chance or give him some space to fix it up, and he lost that scholarship and he got kicked out. And another example is that after that, he then enrolled at Montana State College. And there his classes were usually in the morning, but then his car had broken down and stopped working, and he lived quite far away from there. So he went to the university advisory to change the timing of the classes so that he could get there on time, so he could walk the miles and miles or hitchhike or get there in whatever way. Otherwise he would have to leave in the middle of the night to try and get there. He looked at his grades from his last university that he got kicked out from, which were all Fs obviously because he got kicked out, and said that you have to make sacrifices for learning, and that's what it takes, and therefore they're not going to change it. Not knowing the context of why he wanted to change it in the first place and not giving him that chance. In the book, Chris Langan's story is contrasted by Robert Oppenheimer. Now this guy is probably equally intelligent, a physicist known for heading the American Manhattan Project for the development of nuclear weapons in World War II. Well, that was quite a mouthful to say still. An interesting story from his life is that he used to study at Harvard, then at Cambridge. And at Cambridge, his physics tutor used to make him engage in this minutiae of physics kind of lab experiments, which Oppenheimer really disliked. And at this stage, he was going through some difficulties, some depression, and some kind of emotional instability. So for some absolutely bizarre reason, the book takes us through the story mentioning that in order to fix this issue, Oppenheimer went to the lab, picked up some chemicals, and then tried to poison his tutor to death. And then the story continues and becomes more interesting. After some university meetings, they decide to put him on probation and have him have some psychiatric sessions at Harley Street in order to get him better, and that's case closed after this attempted poisoning. Later he gets appointed to be the spearhead for that Manhattan Project for the development of the crucial strategy for America in World War II. And that's after knowing what had happened a few years before that. Okay, so here we have some different but somewhat similar individuals. Why were their paths laid out so differently from each other? Well, there is a distinct difference which we haven't mentioned. Oppenheimer grew up in one of the wealthiest areas in Manhattan. Meanwhile, Chris Langan grew up the opposite of that. The book then moves on to delve in much more deeply into the pivotal role that some of these factors play in terms of where you were born, to whom you were born, when you were born, the type of environment that you were born into, and what kind of impact they have. So make sure you read that book to find out a bit more about that. Now, some more examples just from on top of my head. This is not in the script, by the way, but it talks about, for example, Bill Gates and how he had some specific advantages that allowed him to enter into the path of making Microsoft a successful startup and then one of the biggest companies in the world. One of those factors is that Bill Gates actually had access to some of the first computers at his school at a time where almost no one had access to computers. So he was able to rack up a whole load of hours of coding and become very different, a different caliber to the peers that were around him, which then paved the way for him to then make Microsoft a successful company. It talks about how some people have become very successful because of the hardship they faced in the path, or the specific community that they come from, or the type of culture they come from, where they come from a hardworking background, or the type of skills that are kind of passed down between generation, paving the way for success. So it's very interesting, and I highly kind of recommend reading this book a bit further. I think one of the most important things that we can take away from this book is that self-awareness plays a pivotal role in our pursuit of success. And how does it do that? Well, self-awareness means that we are aware of the specific advantages that we have been given. Being aware of what type of specific advantages has life given you above anyone else. Is it that from a young age your parents took you to a track and field athletics team and so you've been running from the age of 3? Or is it that for some reason both of your parents are scientists? Is it that your dad or your mum are multi-million-pound business startup people or tech people, and so you can learn things from them? Is it that for some reason your primary school had an after-school club with a professional table tennis player, and so every day from the age of 5 you used to have table tennis classes with a professional tennis table pro? And so that is an advantage that you have over other people that you can use as a means of kind of pursuing success. And that's essentially where I think reconciliation happens with what you can take away from that video, from that book. I mean, so I hope you liked that video. If you liked the video, then like the video, comment, like, subscribe, holla back, safe.